Okay, so as you know, I'm Penny Reid. You know now anyway. I've been a member of UUCJ for almost 10 years. Prior to that, I was a member of the Unitarian Universalist Church of Spokane, Washington for 35 years. So that means I've been a book signer twice, I've been a pledger, I've been a committee member, I've been an RE teacher, board member, worship associate, cook and bottle washer, and even coffee maker for 45 years. And this is the first time I have stood in this pulpit, in this role, in a pulpit, in this role on Sunday morning, ever. So it's, so yeah, I'm a little terrified, but we'll get to it. So you may wonder how I got here. Well, you know how sometimes your mouth speaks before your brain fully engages? That happened to me at a worship team meeting a couple months ago. We get together once a month to look at the service schedule for the next several months so we can discuss who we can invite when we don't have a minister in the pulpit. Sometimes it's somebody from the community, sometimes it's somebody from the congregation. And at our August or September meeting, October 29th showed up on the upcoming calendar, and I said, oh, it's the Sunday before Halloween. We can do something fun. We can have a backwards service, a Halloween service. I can do this service. And the team took me seriously. So here we are. So I do hope our service today, titled Why Halloween, will be educational and fun, and perhaps inspirational. So it's not a backwards service, but I love that Jeff Funderburk wore his jammies to church today. Yeah. So why Halloween? How did it start? And why does its popularity persist and grow even in our modern culture? And somehow I have always thought that Halloween, or when I was old enough to think about it, that Halloween was just an extension of Samhain, the Celtic fall festival. Well, it turns out that's not quite true. This most secular of our holidays completely started as a Christian religious celebration. And I think we all know the word Halloween comes from All Hallows Eve, which is the night before the Christian holy days of All Saints' Day on November 1st and All Souls' Day on November 2nd. And these 3 days are collectively known as All Hallowtide. I've never heard that before. And are a time when Western Christians honor saints, or hallows, on November 1st, and then pray for recently departed souls who have yet to reach heaven on November 2nd. So you can see it's a Catholic doctrine because it basically frames November 2nd in terms of purgatory, and souls still have not made it to heaven. Okay. And there is some speculation that the date of November 1st for All Saints' Day, which was established in the early 9th century, was set because it actually coincided with the Gaelic festival of Samhain. And thus Samhain was Christianized as All Hallows' Day along with its Eve, or Halloween. Other academics believe Halloween began solely as a Christian holiday in the 9th century and just happened to coincide with Samhain because both are observed at a time when the darkness is descending and it's getting colder. And Samhain is actually, and Halloween are actually mid-cycle between the summer solstice and the winter solstice. So it's right in the middle. Okay. And this Samhain was the Gaelic commemoration of the beginning of winter. Okay. But either way, essentially it's believed that Samhain and All Saints and All Souls days basically influenced each other and our modern Halloween. Now, Samhain is one of the 4 Gaelic seasonal festivals, and Samhain marks the beginning of winter. Because the Gaelic day goes from sundown to sundown, The festival starts on October 31st at sundown and goes until sundown on November 1st, so that's why we have the eve. There was a time when cattle was brought down from summer pastures and livestock was slaughtered, in part because there wouldn't be enough hay or grain to feed the animals through the long winter. So special bonfires were lit, festivities were grand, feasting was basically the letter of the law, and the big bonfires were felt to have special protective and cleansing powers. And like the Gaelic May 1st festival of Beltane, Samhain is considered to be a liminal time, when the boundary between this world and the other world is thin, making contact with spirits and fairies more likely. The souls of dead kin were thought to visit homes seeking hospitality, and a place was set at the table for them during the feasting meal. In some Celtic regions, offerings of food for the spirits were placed outside homes, on the ground, or at grave sites. And in Celtic-speaking parts of Britain, mumming and guising, which were essentially informal troops of actors and people in disguise, were a later addition to the festivities, becoming more common in the 16th century and beyond. The costumes themselves may have been a way of imitating and then disguising yourself from the actual spirits released during the festival, some of whom were out to seek revenge for their death. So it was a way of hiding yourself from those vengeful spirits and ghosts. By the 15th century, in the Celtic parts of the British Isles, customs also included baking and sharing soul cakes, S-O-U-L cakes, which are comparable to hot cross buns that you see at Easter time. And the sharing was for all christened souls, and this has been suggested as the origin of trick-or-treat. Groups of poor people would go door to door collecting soul cakes, and in exchange praying for the dead, especially the giver's friends and relatives. While souling, they would carry lanterns made of hollowed out turnips. That's why we see the hollowed out turnips now, which are, of course, a precursor to our jack-o'-lanterns made with pumpkins. And things shifted somewhat during the Protestant Reformation, since Protestants didn't particularly care for all that Catholic purgatory stuff. Although All Hallows Day remained on the liturgical calendar and festivals continued in most Celtic-speaking regions. And in Ireland and the Scottish Highlands, people dressing up and imitating malignant spirits led to people playing pranks, and starting sometime in the 18th century, which is also considered a precursor to our trick-or-treat. As you can imagine, early immigrants to New England weren't in favor of the Halloween or All Saints' Day festivities. They didn't even like Christmas, as you may recall. And it wasn't until the influx of Irish and Scottish immigrants in the 19th century that Halloween became a well-known and major American holiday. Most American Halloween traditions were inherited, actually, from the Irish and the Scots. It was initially confined to these immigrant communities, but Halloween gradually assimilated into the mainstream society and was celebrated and participated in across the land by the early 20th century. So it's a fairly late arrival, actually, which I thought was interesting. And also, through American influence, these Halloween traditions spread to many other countries by the late 20th and early 21st centuries, including Europe and parts of the Far East. So just a couple of interesting tidbits about some of these traditions. In Ireland and Scotland, people traditionally, as I said, carved turnips for Halloween, and immigrants to America decided to use the native pumpkin, as it's much softer and bigger than a turnip, and thus much easier to carve. So that's why we do pumpkins. And trick-or-treating, as I said, probably grew out of the custom of guising, which was practiced actually in Ireland as such until the 1930s. And a form of it is still practiced in the rural Philippines. And while early 20th century postcards show pictures of children, they don't show any trick-or-treating. So that doesn't seem to have become widespread in the US until the late 1930s. And one article I read said it really took off in the 1950s with the building of residential areas in the suburbs. The annual New York's Village Halloween Parade was begun in 1974. It is the world's largest Halloween parade and America's only major nighttime parade. It attracts over 60,000 costumed participants and over 2 million spectators. I didn't know it even existed, so yeah. It's anticipated that Americans will spend $12.2 billion this year for Halloween, with costumes and decorations and food, et cetera, including $480 million for pet costumes. Yeah. And you'll probably notice I haven't said a word about Dia de los Muertos, which is practiced in Mexico, and then there are other traditions, faith traditions all over the world that have this sort of liminal festival time, and that's a whole nother sermon, so we're not going to go there today. But all this sort of begs the question, so why do we continue to celebrate Halloween, which, if anything, has become more popular over the last 15 to 20 years? In a 2017 sermon, UU minister Gloria Holland talks about her own expectation that Halloween would slowly wither away on the pumpkin vine. And you may remember the scary urban legends about candy embedded with razor blades or police stations setting up X-ray scanners to look at kids' candy hauls. And by the way, most of that isn't true. Just so you know, they really are urban legends, but I remember it. Yeah. And Gloria goes on to say, so in this time, in the early 21st century, parents have become more fearful and protective, less likely to let their children go out and encounter strangers. And plus, we know that sugary candy is bad for their health. Many conservative Christians disparage Halloween as some kind of satanic pagan observance, of course. And in our hectic, workaholic society, traditions seem to hold less sway. And I thought this meant that Halloween would die away. But it didn't. In addition to not withering up and dying away for kids, adults, hungry for some sweet celebration in their own lives, have embraced Halloween with gusto, dressing up in elaborate costumes, hosting elaborate parties, and the adultification of Halloween has definitely occurred over the last, I think, 20 years, probably. It's really blossomed, I guess. And why? So in a New York Times essay just yesterday, Melissa Kirsch wrote, "In spite of the ghouls and revenants and other morbid players from the sidewalk boneyard, Halloween is a holiday for the living. In a world that fears irretrievably online, where our every interaction is mediated by technology, Halloween, weirdly, is not. Trick-or-treating is an embodied activity. You have to show up. A Halloween costume is a physical get-up. You wear it out into the real world where you interface with real people and get real candy. How quaint it seems when you think about it. For all the ways in which we might find legitimate fault with Halloween, it's too commercial, it's culturally insensitive, it promotes greed and tooth decay. It's really a refreshingly mundane celebration, and it gets people physically together. So I don't know about you, but I love trick-or-treaters. And even when the big kids come, I think that's just great. They like to pretend to be little for the night, or at least get some free candy. It beats staying home and looking at their phones, I guess. And the little ones are so darling in their Elsa or Fairy or Spider-Man costumes, trying to figure out this really weird thing about adults giving them, candy. It makes me remember my own daughter's Halloween costumes, and I promise you they were all homemade, never store-bought. I did great costumes. And I even remember my own childhood costumes, and especially the year that I was a gypsy. I think I was about 6 or 7. I had short, curly, blonde hair. So I'm not sure if anyone else knew that I was a gypsy, but I sure did. I had jewels, and I had a long skirt, and I was really full of myself. So in addition to enjoying the present moment with Halloween, there's this other opportunity to reflect on the past. Memories of your own childhood, memories of your own kids, just having fun with other kids and other adults on Halloween. And I will say that my own favorite all-time costume was one I made for myself. At the rehab hospital where I worked, the staff dressed up for Halloween. One year, I have to tell you, I don't know if you've ever seen they're fiberglass body jackets that are used to be used for people who broke their backs, and they're usually about like this. And we had one that was an old one at the hospital. This is not the favorite costume I'm talking about, but this is another favorite costume. And this particular woman was much more endowed than I am. So I took it home and I spray painted it, and I turned it into Wonder Woman's corset. And it worked. And it was really uncomfortable, but it sure was fun. So I have much more sympathy for patients who have to wear those things. Yeah. So anyway, we dress up for Halloween, and then at the end of the day, towards the end of the day, staff members bring their children who circulate around patients' rooms, and the patients get to hand out candy that we've given them. It's really fun. So one year, I made a Jack Sparrow costume. Vest, pirate pants, and shirt. I had a long black wig with the beads. I even pasted on a mustache and beard. I looked fabulous. And as I stood watching the festivities in the hall, I suddenly hear this tiny little voice say, "Look, it's Jack Sparrow!" And this little 4-year-old boy came running up the hall to get a hug. It was such a lovely moment. I will never forget that. So Halloween is fun for kids and adults, and it's nostalgic with lots of mostly fun memories. And there's a special bond at times with kids. And it's tangible, okay? It's fun to see all the costumes, the ghosts and ghoulies and fairies and pirates, and the occasional, "Can you tell me about your costume?" Not sure what that is. Okay. But what else is special about Halloween? Well, there's a theory that people began wearing masks for Halloween in Celtic lands because it was believed that the souls of the departed roamed the earth until All Saints' Day, or All Hallows' Eve, which is Tuesday. And All Hallows' Eve, or All Hallows' Eve, was the last chance for the dead to wreak vengeance on their living enemies before moving on to the next world. So to avoid being recognized, people wore masks to disguise themselves, just in case some dead soul had it in for them. In truth, most of us wear some sort of mask all the time, often masking our true feelings to avoid embarrassment or ridicule or anger, or just to get along in the world. But here's the paradox about wearing a mask, a physical mask at Halloween. No one can tell who you are. So you get to be silly and dance and have fun. and potentially reveal a part of yourself you normally wouldn't share. As one friend said, when I put on my mask, I get to be who I really am. And maybe we take off the mask that we wear every day. So that brings up the question, who are you and I really? It's interesting to remember that Halloween, All Hallows Eve, is considered to be that liminal space when the boundary between the living and the dead is at its thinnest, most permeable. As Reverend Holland says, whether or not you believe in any kind of existence beyond the death of our bodies, it's an auspicious time to gratefully acknowledge the love and wisdom that gets passed down from one generation to the next, and to remember and feel gratitude for the lives of those now gone. So it's a time to remember and acknowledge where we're from, our heritage, and how we got here. Every decision made by every one of your ancestors created the person you are today and the place you're in right now. And every decision you will make right now will impact the future in some tiny or profound way. It's humbling to think about that. So Libby Roderick is a singer, songwriter, poet, and activist, and a lifelong Alaskan. Also one of my favorite singers. She wrote, How Could Anyone Tell You You Were Anything Less Than Beautiful, which is in our Teal hymnal. So my favorite song of Libby's is called Bones. And it starts off like this, and I'll tell you the first time I heard it, I just had to start it over and play it again. It just, wow. I come from a long line of dead people. I come from a tall pile of bones. My people lie sleeping all under the world, their souls turn to roots, leaves, and stones. And another favorite line, my great-grandmother's eyes stare out from my face, her skinny bones dance round in my clothes. You can almost hear the whisper of her sweet southern song in this voice I've been calling my own. So it seems that Halloween can be the perfect day to reflect on what heritage means to you. So celebrate, have fun, wear a costume, enjoy the kiddos and feast on candy or Samhain dishes, take your mask off or put one on, and above all, enjoy dancing in your bones and appreciate all who brought you to this space and time. Blessed be.